Well, just a little bit about the Society of Authors. It is the national organisation for writers, so if there are any new and emerging writers here that want to come and talk to us about the services that we can offer and help you with, my co-chair Peter Jenks is here, so come and see either Peter or myself later. But meanwhile, let's get on with tonight's subject, which is the pros, cons and practicalities of working with a literary agent. And once again, Dunedin's punching above its weight because I've got three Dunedin-based writers here, Lee Wood, Phil O'Brien and Vanda Symon. And Lee is represented by an agent in the United States, Phil by a New Zealand agent, and Vanda has got a UK agent. So I think we're going to cover the whole field tonight. What we'll do is I'll talk to them individually, ask them some questions, and then we will have a sort of perhaps a wider discussion about the merits of literary agents. If they're worth their 15 or 20%, none of you have to reveal exactly what that figure is. But, and then we'll take questions from the floor. So we should be done in maybe just over an hour, just depending on how we're going. Right, so firstly, I'm just going to actually cover what it generally, I mean, these guys will give you more detail based on their experience of having an agency, but I just wanted to kind of cover really what a literary agent does. It's a sort of term that we might hear bandied around, like a Hollywood agent or my agent, but you might want to know that essentially what they do is it's someone that goes to work for you. So they intercede between you and the publisher by negotiating the best deal possible and ensuring that all the payments that are due to you are correct, and doing contract negotiations and placing your work, if possible, with a publisher. So they're trying to find the best match for the work that you've slaved over and you think has merit and the wider marketplace. And hopefully they will also intercede if there are any problems along through the publishing process. They will intercede so that you maintain a good relationship and you can concentrate on the business of writing. So that's generally their role. These guys will elaborate on how the relationship that they've got with their agents works. And for that, they tend to take a percentage of sales of your book and any associated costs, and generally none of them ask for an upfront fee, and that's usually a sign of not a particularly good agent, because it's all about the service that they provide and the way that they run interference between you writing your book and the wider marketplace. So that I think perhaps, and these guys will comment too, I think acting as a buffer is probably the best description of a good agent. So without much further ado, we're going to start with Vanda, and I'll just, and then Bill will speak about his experiences, and then Lee, and then I'd just like to ask some general questions that you can answer. So Vanda, Symon has been writing for, gosh, 10 years?
I've been writing for, I'm figuring it out on the age of my youngest child. We started when he was 6 months, he's 9 now, so
right,
8.5 years. But my first novel was actually published in 2007.
That's right. So Vanda, most of you will probably know that she's got a very good profile as a crime writer of detective set here in Dunedin, Detective Sam Shepherd. He has written 4 books in that series, I guess you'd call it, yeah, for Penguin. The first one was Overkill, then there was Containment,
The
Ringmaster, Containment, and then Bound, which came out at the end of last year, I think, didn't it? Yeah, and made went straight to the top of their sellers list, so that was brilliant. And if Vanda's looking at dazed and confused, it's just because she's just finished her last book on Friday.
I handed a new manuscript on Thursday.
Yeah,
after a couple of months of extremely solid work, and before that, many months of fairly lackadaisical work. And, so I've got that nice little feeling that you've handed it in and now someone's pulled the plug out. Yeah. So
so Vanda's, the Sam Shepherd books were with Penguin. And it wasn't that long ago that you were encouraged to, I think another writer that you met possibly look further afield, and Vanda's got a UK agency called Gregory and Company, which represents another crime writers like Val McDermott and Annette Walters. So do you want to just talk about that process, Vanda, of getting, why you decided to get an agent, and particularly one in the UK?
Well, for me, my very first novel that I got published and the subsequent ones in the series, they came about published in New Zealand as an unsolicited, me putting a manuscript into a publisher and hoping, which is something you can actually do in New Zealand. In many countries overseas, you just can't even get access to a publisher unless it's via an agent, but in New Zealand we are actually quite lucky in that you can make a submission to a publisher and they will look at it. So I was very, very fortunate to get picked up straight away from an unsolicited manuscript, because the odds of that, they say, are about less than 1%. So that was all ticking along nicely, quite nicely, and I thought, oh, this is fine. I don't actually need an overseas agent at all. Penguin, as just part of what they did, they also took my novels to Frankfurt, to the Frankfurt Book Fair, so they were also, in their own way, trying to push my novels out onto the international market. And it was through Penguin that I got the first two of my novels in the series published in Germany and translated into German. So the publisher did actually do some work on my behalf in getting the book out there, because it's in their best interest to do so. So, and that seemed all fine and happy to me, and I thought it was all going to go along quite swimmingly, until at the end of last year, just before, all I'd actually found was in with the publishers, and it was due to come out in February, and they kind of said to me, well, actually, we've decided we're not going to continue the series anymore because it's not selling enough copies for us. Which I find rather ironic, because Bound went straight to #1 and then spent the next 3 months on the bestsellers list. So I was like, well, what are you going to do? So my going about choosing trying to find an agent really was a bit about getting the pit with my publisher. Because, I just suddenly felt vulnerable up until that time. There were a couple of things happening at the time. I had that news from Penguin, and also Jeff Walker, who was the managing director of Penguin, who was always the man that I had dealt with. He was finishing up at Penguin, and I felt extremely loyal to Jeff. I mean, he was a wonderful publisher. He was the kind of publisher that, even though I didn't have any work to or anything like that, I'd get little things in the mail with a wee photocopied article. Thought you might be interested in this. Or just medium email flick through every now and then. And it made me feel as an author that, hey, actually, they remember that I'm here and that I'm actually doing work for them. But with him leaving Penguin and then suddenly Penguin turning around and saying, we don't want your books anymore, I thought, well, actually it is time that I do look at looking out for myself and getting an agent. Because I just suddenly felt vulnerable. My rock, who had been Jeff Walker, was suddenly gone, and it was like, okay, it's a big wide publishing world out there, what am I going to do? So I had had a number of friends over the years say, you should get an agent, you should get an agent, and one of them had been particularly pushy about it. So for me, the path to finding an agent was actually ridiculously easy. Paul Cleave's a Christchurch crime writer, and he's done extremely well overseas. He was #1 in Amazon Germany for many weeks with his book The Cleaner, and he's sold a lot of books, and he had this agent, Gregory and Company, and he kept saying to me, Vanda, you must send them a letter. I've told them all about you. And then I'd get another email from him. Have you written to Gregory and Co yet? No, I haven't. Because again, I had that sort of that loyalty thing. I didn't want to go, because Jeff was still on the scene then, and it's about disloyal, even thinking about getting an agent. So when I finally did get the gumption up to approach them and say, hey, Paul, please recommend I get in touch with you. They just said, I'll send over a copy of all your books. And then they just emailed back and said, yes, that's great. We'll send you a contract. Okay, so suddenly I've got this agent who's
What? Paul?
Beverly.
Beverly.
I'm brave face so badly. Names just fly out of me. So as Beverly said, the same agent with people like Val McDermott and Annette Walters, so which is wonderful. Now the specific benefits that they can give to me are that they're actually a boutique agency that specialises in crime fiction. And so that would be one of my messages to you folks tonight, if you're looking at agents, is But look at one who actually specialises more in the field in which you write, because they're going to do a better job, or they're going to know the marketplace and the publishers and people, and have the contacts in the publishers that perhaps a broader agent won't. So, for me, they're specifically crime fiction. They're actually quite small, so they've got a fairly, a small number of clients that they're dealing with. And also, I didn't actually know at the time, but they have a full in-house editing service. They actually have an editor of their own. So the editor that I get is also the person who edits Vanda and Minette Waters. So it just sort of gave me that, again, that feeling of, okay, I've got someone who I can rely on and look back on. And again, as Beverly said earlier, just that knowledge of someone else is going to take care of the paperwork rubbish. I mean, I hate dealing with contracts. I hate dealing with having to chase up about money, because invariably you do. So to actually have someone else take that off my hands is a wonderful feeling. And by the way, I'm utterly shameless. You can ask me any questions about money. They take 15%.
Yeah. So when you say chase up about money, you're talking about the royalty payments?
Yeah, all royalty payments
And what was kind of Penguin's reaction to you getting an agent after the fact, as it were, almost?
Well, Jeff Walker was still at Penguin at that stage, and he was really pleased. And he thought it was a very good step for me to take to get that chance into the overseas markets. Because the New Zealand market's tiny. Before I got the German contracts, I didn't make enough money for coffee. And with the German contracts, that's when I actually made the lump sums money that I was able to get a new heat pump, pay for my son's tonsil operation, and a new picket fence.
So they didn't see it as sort of inserting another layer between them and you, or?
I think they did to some extent, because they asked, they sort of said, who's your agent, what kind of expectations do you have with this relationship? And I had asked the agents precisely that. I said, okay, we're in 12-hour different time zone, so that makes life interesting for a start, What's the best way of doing that? They said, on the day-to-day stuff, just talk to your publishers straight. If you're comfortable with doing that, then do that. If then you build up that relationship with them, keep it up. And then we can intercede for the things like the negotiations on contracts and all the icky stuff.
So you sort of saw, I mean, obviously there was a circumstantial thing because Penguin had kind of, you'd sort of reached it.
Actually, no, I shouldn't say they didn't jump to me. They decided they didn't want Sanchez, they wanted something else, which is the book that I've just finished.
It's clear that you're actually writing a different kind of book. So, and that's going to be used to launch you in the UK, isn't it? So you're sort of coming in on that. For them, it was easier for them to launch me out on something fresh and new than on the older series. So they said they'll launch me out on the new book, and then if that goes well, they go, oh, she's got this series as well. You did that too. So I come from a sort of position of very, very new into the whole field of having an agent. So I haven't actually formed an opinion on whether it's a good thing practically or a bad thing. I'm just sort of going to see how it pans out. Excellent, thank you for that. Now we'll move to Bill O'Brien, who a lot of you will know locally as well. Bill was police officer here, 35 years?
Not all here, but 35 years.
In total. And you've been writing for how many years ago?
I began in 1990, after the Minor tragedy. And the reason for that was basically that I've always been a believer that we should record factual things like historical things and do it really well. And because I was involved in the police side of Aramoana, I got called out fairly early. And after I'd helped set up the operation, then they gave me the media problems that just flooded in from all around the world. It just was unbelievable. And in the subsequent weeks I was thinking, that didn't happen. I was reading things in papers and magazines and thinking, it didn't happen like that. He didn't do that. She didn't go there. And I thought that if you don't do something, an event like that, even though it's a dark chapter in our history, will be consigned to all this misinformation. And it was interesting that only about a year ago someone came out to my house to repair something, and he saw something on the wall about Aramoana in my office, and he said, "Oh, I've got a theory about that. There were 2 people involved," and I thought, "Oh, God."
Here we go.
You sort of say, "Look, get real." But that's what happens in time if you don't record things. So I wanted to do that, and so that's really where I started my writing.
So it was really about
21 years ago.
Yeah, it was about setting the record straight in
Yep.
that instance, wasn't it?
Very much.
And Bill's gone on to write all manner of things. I remember when you, when I first met you a few years ago, you said you had a bookshelf. I mean, your aim wasn't it? You had an open, empty bookshelf, and the aim was to fill it. And I think you first started putting your books that way, so it took up a bit more room. But pretty much I think you've done that now, because Bill's written, he's written a lot of children's books, a lot of children's historical fiction. I mean, to me, I think you've got the whole spectrum of good and evil covered, really, in some ways, haven't you? Because you've written about some very dark things, and Bill's latest book, as you know, is this Sophie Elliott's stories, Sophie's Legacy, and Leslie Elliott, the co-writer, and obviously Sophie's mum is here tonight. And so that's something that's, you know, is difficult and emotional.
Oh, yeah.
Really tough writing, and once again it's a record straight.
But important things, you know, recording things properly, and there's always a reason for doing them. But with the kids stuff, it's, it's just a range. I wanted to have a go at everything, because what actually happened in Aramoana was, after I'd written that book and Penguin took it on, it ended up in being reviewed, and someone at the Hawke's Bay Herald Tribune wrote very complimentary things about the book, but at the end, because he thought he was a critic, which meant he had to criticise, he said, "By the way, the writer can't write." And I thought, well, I'll fix you. When I've had my 100th publication, I'll write you a letter. And,
what are you up to?
Well, it's getting close. It must be around the 80 mark, so I'll get there.
And you've done a lot of, you know, the other side of the thing, which is things like cancer gene research, and some of your police things. You've done forensic stories, and so it's sort of kind of creative non-fiction, for want of a better term on that kind of thing, isn't it? I know you were first published by Scholastic and Learning Media, and that was more in the educational kind of children's journal type areas to start with. So Bill was also the 2008 New Zealand College of Education children's writer, which is just a little bit.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, you enjoyed it, didn't you? It was good.
Well, you know, I'm an arts fellow at a university, and I didn't get school cert, so so things are progressing. I have to go back and talk to the students, and I can tell people I'm a university lecturer, and I haven't got school cert.
And I think it was, if I'm right in understanding this, I think it was Roger Hall who suggested that you maybe get an agent, and that's how put on to Ray Richards. So Ray Richards is a kind of legend in the publishing world. He's now 90, and I think he's been representing you pretty much from the get-go, or after you got that introduction.
Yeah, pretty much. When I was writing Aramoana, I didn't know anything about the writing world, and I was playing tennis locally with Roger Hall. I knew him pretty well, and I said, "How do you get going?" And he said, "Oh, write to my agent." And I thought, that's just what you did. So I wrote to his agent, and he went to Penguin, and they took the book on, and then I became one of the Richards literary stable. But then Ray went to America on some trip, and he had some heart problem coming back, and he decided he had to cut his workload down. So he took all the ones that weren't making a lot of money and dumped them, which was me, and I ended up without an agent, so I had to really find my own feet, and I'm a determined little person. Well, I don't take things too easy, and so I decided that I'd go my own way. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, Pauline Cartwright, who is a writer over in Alexandra, excellent writer, a great inspiration, because when I went to see her, I looked at her bookshelf, and she had her bookshelf full too. But all her books were around like that, and mine was still that way. And she's brilliant. And she decided that I should get back into the Richards thing, and I did. And the advantage of having a literary agent is that publishers, when they want a series done, for instance, Scholastic wanted the My Story series, they don't go to a whole lot of authors and say this is what we want. They go to an agent and say, who in your stable do you think could do this? So they go to Pauline Cartwright and me and a few other people, and that's how you get started. And so it's just so much easier that they bring in all the work. And I think the last 5 or 6 books I've written have been requests from publishers, which is brilliant because then you know it's going to get published. You don't write it on the hope that someone will pick it up. So that's really, really good. That's basically how
it's almost like you can't get shortlisted for one of the better.
Yeah, well, you're there and you know, and it's just so much easier for a publisher to go to one agent or 2 agents and say, we're looking for people for this. Who can you recommend? Great.
Can you just give us an example of the sort of books that have been done that way, Vanda? The last?
The last ones?
Yeah, just so they understand the subject matter that might happen that way.
Yeah, well, I went to Barbara Larson, for instance, at Longacre and said, Barbara, I've got this really good idea for a biography on a guy called Dr. Jeffrey Orwell. And I gave her all the stuff and she considered it, and I went back to see her and she said, yeah, we're thinking about that. By the way, would you like to write a book about policing? And I thought, well, I know a bit about it. So I did. And the book before that, I was just working away in my office at home, and an email came through from Bateman's in Auckland. And they said they've got a commissioning editor, and she wrote to me and said, would you like to write a book about forensic science? And I thought, oh yeah, I could do that. I used to be in forensics in the police for a long time, and that was my great passion. And she didn't even know that I had been in the police. She was quite new, didn't even know me, but wrote to me and asked me if I could do it. So it's things like that. Castaway, which ended up in the New Zealand Book Awards, a kid's novel, an historical novel that happened through an agent and through the publisher, and they said, would you like to write a book about something adventurous? And I thought, well, that's pretty adventurous.
That's what targeted at boys, isn't it?
Yeah.
My kids loved it.
Yeah.
Trouble is, her youngest, I think, no, the oldest, he read it 7 times, but he only bought 1 book. Bought 7, didn't it?
He even looked at his friends.
Yeah, they probably borrowed it. But that's how it works. If you're just doing it yourself, it's quite a battle.
So just to,
sorry, so who did you say that you were still with Ray Richards?
Mm.
Right. So they booted you off, but then they took you back again.
Yeah, well, only because he had to cut down his workload, but then through Pauline Cartwright, it sort of influenced, and I got back in, and it's sort of taken off again.
So how many publications have you done when you were in Limbo Land?
Oh, heaps.
So you had your own track.
20 or 30, yeah. But it was harder. It's like, I'm a bit cunning. See, I write to publishers and I say, I've got this idea, what do you reckon? They said, oh, we'd love to see it. And when I've written it, I send back and say, this is the book you wanted me to send you. And it's like, you think you've got a foot in the door, but they soon get wise to that, because if it's rubbish, they'll soon chuck it away. But I have had I've been lucky. When you look at the amount of books out there and all the publications and things, I don't know how I've done it, but yeah, maybe they just don't want me keeping on plaguing them, so they give in and say, all right, we'll do it.
So how does the sort of, on a kind of day-to-day level, how does the sort of relationship work? Like what bits do you do and what do you rely on Ray to do?
I write.
Yeah.
He does everything else.
Really?
Yeah, they will not only find the publisher, but they do the contracts, and they, in fact, basically, this is something that Ray sent me years ago, and it's quite good, that he said you don't need an agent if, you wouldn't need an agent if you have a thorough understanding of the publishing market and its dynamics, the best publishers for your book and why, are you financially numerate and confident of being able to negotiate the best commercial deal available? Those sorts of things, and contracts. And that really came to the fore one day. Ray rang me up and he said, Bill, I'm brimming with excitement. And I thought, yeah, well, I'm busy, I'm not. But, what is it? And he said, I've got film director, producer, just been to see me, and he wants to do a film about Aramoana. And my very first thought was, no, please don't. But I'm wise enough to know that someone would have done it. I'd heard that someone was going to. If you just say, I'm not interested, they'll make it, and you'll have no influence, and you'll see it, and it'll be absolutely ghastly. So I got on board even before Doug Sarkis, and I said, not Doug, Robert. Yeah, Doug's their father. I know him too. He plays tennis with me and Roger. Rob Sarkis, and so I wanted to have an influence to make sure it was done really well and respectfully and those sorts of things. And so I could help Rob with the filmmaking and leave Ray Richards to sort out contracts and film rights and whatever else. And because I've got lots of publications all around the world, and some of them are only piddling little things that bring in a wee bit, but it all mounts up. And you just leave that to the agency. And they're going to do it really well because they're going to get 15%, and if they don't do it properly, they're going to get 15% of not much. And as it is, they get 15% of not much. Because writing's a pretty tough world, I can tell you. But, you know, I just leave it to them. So I find having an agent is really quite good.
And you really knows the difference in the sort of wilderness years when you didn't have an agent?
Oh yeah. I was constantly talking and just negotiating and following things up, and this way I don't even have to worry. I just get royalty checks for less 15%. Yeah. Plus less tax and less ACC levies, which is self-employed, and I have to start paying for the privilege to write soon.
Very good, thanks, Phil. You did raise the point though about saying, you know, if you thought you could do without an agent, and I guess I just wanted to maybe talk about, because I don't want people going away from here and thinking, well, I'm not going to be a successful writer if I don't have an agent, because there are all kinds of writing that can be done, and I just wanted to maybe think about some of the considerations when you don't have